you see business models changing with Lean Startup? So if all investors know I'm going to pivot several times, is it one big lie when I show them my business model with the hockey stick and just make sure that I have enough runway to pivot 3 or 4 times before I actually find my spot? Or how do you see that changing?
Yeah, I would say you're at, all right, so there's savvy and unsavvy investors, right? Because there are people who will just invest because they think it's hot and cool and stuff like that. But savvy investors will never believe your business plan, never believe the hockey stick, but they believe that you can learn. And so you're much better off showing them, so you have this business canvas. Everything in that business canvas when you start is a hypothesis. So say, here's my hypotheses and here's how I'm going to prove whether or not those are right. It's something called gold question metric, and I'm going to wait on that road because that will back in customer discovery, but we can do that another time. But so you have your hypotheses, your goals, now what questions you need to ask to prove those true or false, and then how do you measure that? And you're going to report to them every week on how you're doing. Investors love to hear that kind of stuff because at least like you're being realistic. Like you know, it's not like you've been smoking the good stuff thinking that you're going to live the hockey stick, because that never happened to anybody. The guy, even a Groupon, remember? They wandered around in the desert for a year trying to build social awareness, activism software called The Point. Right? They weren't very, very successful until they realized that the tipping point had something to do with couponing, which they realized when they were sitting in a bar, failing, trying to figure out what they were trying to do. I brought Mike Evans, and he was trying to do street parking in Chicago. So he realized that all the aldermen would never help him, and he was depressed, and he was on his way home, and he's trying to figure out what he's going to eat. And then came on, and so all this stuff. So no, anybody who's savvy will know that. Most people will know about the Lean Startup. A lot of them, a lot of your more savvy investors, especially because now you're starting to get super angels and you're starting to get angel pools. And so they know about that kind of stuff. But so if I'm investing in you, I just want to see how well do you learn. You know, and that you totally are willing to go out there. Because if you just find a group of customers and you go and say, here's what I think your pain is, they're like, no, that's not my pain, this is my pain. And then you go, oh, well, I can solve that. Well, eventually, you will come into a product. If you're willing to, now, if you are full of yourself and you think, like, I know everything, well, then you're never going to get there. Because those are the guys I see fail. Those are those guys that I'm not laying on the roadside dead. Was because they weren't able to make that change. But nobody, anybody that you talk to is successful, they never got there doing what they think they do. Whereas Bernhard said originally that Steve Blank said, no business plan survives first contact with a customer. Because you learn all this stuff that you didn't even know. The answer?
At what point in time, let's say you are doing a cost per action revenue-based model, and you pick up so much traction that perhaps you get a little greedy and want to charge vendors maybe an initiation fee, a membership fee, or you just raise your margins, or at what point in time can you do the pivot? I mean, is that incorrect to think about scaling something like that, or do you always want to look for additional revenue sources, how to get more out of your customers, cross-sell, etc.?
Well, you want to do both. You want to figure out cross-selling, but you also want to figure out all right, so there's two different things. One of them is a pricing question, right? So like, where should you set the price? And that's a whole other hour. I mean, because pricing is art and science at the same time. But basically what you want to do is, really, really simply on pricing, you just want to keep raising your price until people say no. If you never ever lose business because of price, you're way too low priced. And if you lose every deal because of price, you're way too high priced. And I know that this sounds like really simple, but there's more science to it than that. But I don't want to.
I guess sort of an example is, let's say Grubhub. At what point in time do they take more cost per action from a restaurant, or are they just really focusing on scaling it to more restaurants out there?
Okay, what you want to do is first you want to build a model that you know can scale. Right? That's how you get funding. If you can build a model that you know can scale, and you can just go out to anybody who's got money, and you can say, well, look, I know that my customer acquisition cost is N, and when I spend N, I get Y. And all I need from you is $400 billion so that I can scale up to this, you know what I mean? That's a pretty simple thing to fund, because they don't have to worry about whether or not you're going to pivot all over and do all that, right? Because you've already got that model. So that's your goal, is to build a scalable model first. Then to scale, you need to get funding. If you're bootstrapping, then you need to balance that, right? Because if you grow way too fast, you actually burn through too much cash too fast. Because remember, your money's up front. Your customer acquisition costs you pay before you actually get the money back from the customer, like you're getting a monthly subscription fee. So it might take 3, 4, 6, 8 months before you get your money back. So you have to be careful that you don't run out of money in that time, because you're having to front this every time you get a customer. And that's why like really successful startups can go under. I mean, Peapod, if they didn't sell, Peapod, right before they sold, every time they got a new customer, it was costing them $164. So signing a new customer was the most painful thing. It's like cutting their toe off one slice at a time, right? Because you don't want more customers, because you're going to go out of business. That's why they had to sell. And that's why they sold for a real low multiple. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Question?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you're working on a project that needs a depth of market, like a dating site, you need a lot of guys and a lot of girls in order to get signups. How do you approach that?
Okay, so this is, yeah. Well, that's the general theory. Get girls, but it's basically and that's the
Whoever's willing to pay more, right?
That's the ladies' night at the bar theory.
Okay.
No. Well, so you're asking me, how do you acquire customers? Like, how do you go out and acquire customers?
Well, or
what you have to do is figure out what's the pain of dating sites. Why aren't they getting what they want on eHarmony and all that? If you can figure out why eHarmony sucks, then you go and place ads in Google. Whenever anybody types in eHarmony or Match.com or OkCupid, that your ad shows up there, and it talks totally about the pain of why those sites are terrible. And then you'll draw customers to your site. And there's a lot of other stuff there, but I don't want to bore everybody with how to do market positioning. That's what it is, the market positioning problem. It needs to be based on pain. So you have pain, market-texture, solution. And again, that could be a whole hour. I'm not going to tell you about that. In my mind, positioning is one of the most important things you can do.
I got a question.